to my shame, I have to say I'm the one who missed the elephant in this case. When Julian Assange's lawyers first contacted me, I didn't want to get into this case. I saw this message, appearing on my screen that Julian Assange is asking for your protection. And I immediately had this visceral reaction of, oh, this is this hacker, this rapist, this spy, this, traitor. I'm not going to get manipulated by this guy. And I kind of just dropped that message. I didn't even get into this case. And so they had to come back 3 months later, and that was just a few weeks before he was expelled from the embassy, and say, look, we really have clear indications that he might be expelled from the embassy soon, and that would mean that he would be extradited to the US, where he might be facing an unfair trial and human rights violations. And they sent me a couple of pieces of evidence. And I started to look at these. And the deeper I got into this case, the more contradictions appeared. And I realized that there was really nothing to back up this narrative about the rapist and narcissist, the traitor and all this, but that this really had been created, this narrative, intentionally, to divert attention from what this case is really about. Because it's not about Assange and whether he feeds his cat or whether he skateboards in the embassy or all these kinds of, frankly, nonsense. This is really about state secrecy being exposed by an investigative journalist who has come up with a mechanism that is extremely powerful because it offers whistleblowers a possibility to transmit evidence for misconduct anonymously, without incurring a lot of risk. And WikiLeaks, his organization, would then publish this evidence for the benefit of the public. And so that's extremely powerful. And governments immediately realize that if this proliferates, if there's not one WikiLeaks, but maybe 100 or 1,000 WikiLeaks at some point all over the world, then that's the end of our business model of secrecy. All of this I missed in the beginning. I just had this narrative in front of my eyes of, oh, Assange, this is this bad guy, you see? And so it made me miss the elephant in the room, which is the things he has exposed, because that affects all of us. As I said, it's everybody who does not want to wake up tomorrow in a state where it's become a crime to tell the truth, because that's exactly the point we're at right now. This case, Julian Assange's case, is not really about Julian Assange. Yes, it affects him, obviously, more than anybody else. But it is about our right to know what governments are doing with the tax money they take from us and with the power we delegate to them, because they want to keep that secret. And they want to punish you if you tell the public what's going on. If you know about the dirty secrets that do exist, and about the war crimes, the torture, about the corruption, and you inform the public about it, they'll call it espionage, and they'll try and sentence you and put you away for life. That is what criminalizing the truth looks like. And where actually the crimes committed by governments are no longer crimes because they enjoy complete impunity, where they can do to you whatever they want, and no one is allowed to report on it because that would be a crime. What was so shocking about this, that I myself, as a mandated human rights expert who's trained and for 20 years has been asking all those uncomfortable questions, I was basically deceived by this public narrative that has been spread about Julian Assange for 10 years.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kelley. I'm the editor and co-producer of Assange Countdown to Freedom with Randy Credico. And all the clips you'll see, or most of the clips, are all from his show that he's been doing for years. In fact, some of his first shows, Assange Countdown to Freedom, were with Julian himself. So we have several great candidates here. I've got a couple that I think might come in a little late. But I just want to point out we have people across the country. Phil Anderson running for Senate in Wisconsin, Jason Call, Washington's 2nd, and Justin Paglino, Connecticut Senate, right?
Yes.
And then my co-host here, Matt Ho, who ran for Senate in North Carolina. So for some of you that are big Assange supporters, you've seen Nils Meltzer maybe a lot. You've seen clips of him, and I think he's such a powerful voice. I want to play it at the top each time, because the point of this panel is to get more people, more candidates, and more people that could be voting for you to hear his side of things, because I thought what he said is so powerful, because in the beginning he fell for the narratives too, as you hear him say. And I always thought that was a good way to start, because that it's such a powerful thing, these narratives, and it's so hard to get past that, to talk to people. But so I'll kick it over to Matt. Do you want to introduce yourself, and then we'll go around and let everyone.
Yeah, thanks, Kelley. Thank you for organizing this. We had one of these last week. Went very well with a host of candidates, and now we have 3 great candidates tonight with us, all of whom are willing to speak up, not just for Julian Assange, not just for WikiLeaks, but for the bigger issues, the broader issues of transparency, of access of the public to what their government is doing, and ultimately to our First Amendment protections. Ultimately, this comes down to a constitutional issue. And I think that's what so many of us who've supported Julian have been saying. Yes, it's about the man, it's about the organization, it's about the war crimes that took place in Iraq and Afghanistan. But to a larger point, this is about the First Amendment. This is about our constitutional rights. So I'm really excited to do this with you again tonight, and I know we're going to do more, because we do have a good number of candidates, whether they be Democrats, Republicans, Greens, Libertarians, Independents, who are willing to speak out on this issue. So I'm Matt Ho. I ran for the Senate with the Green Party in North Carolina, and I am going to ask Phil Anderson to introduce himself.
Well, thanks, Matt, and thanks, Kelley, for inviting me. As Matt said, I'm Phil Anderson. I'm running for United States Senate in Wisconsin. I am a libertarian. I have run for this office before. In 2016, I ran on the same ticket as Gary Johnson and got a little less than 90,000 votes, which was not too bad for a first time through. Hopefully this time I'm going to win, or at least make a big enough dent in the 2 parties' rank and file candidates that'll be running, to make them encompass and to address some of the issues that we're bringing up. That's my goal.
Okay, and Chris just joined us. Chris Richardson is in California's 6th district running.
Yes, right underneath Sacramento.
Okay.
Yeah, this is my 4th attempt at running for the Green Party. We have a very strong, unfortunately, Democratic machine in this county, and but this time it looks like we may have a chance.
Well, it's hard. It's really hard in talking with candidates to sort of get past and get some of the corporate party, the Democrat and Republican candidates to join. But when I point out this letter from McGovern that was signed by sponsored by McGovern and signed by most of the squad, and then you have the House resolution, these are actually not third-party candidates. These are all Democrats and Republicans that have come on board in support of dropping the charges against Assange. So we did have 1 or 2 of the regular party people last time, and I think hopefully we still have 1 or 2 joining. That is 2 Republicans, excuse me. So we might. But okay, Jason.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Jason Call, running for the 3rd time in Washington's 2nd district. This is actually my first time running as a Green. I ran as a Democrat in the prior 2 election cycles. And Washington's got a top 2 primary system, just like California, and I came in 3rd both times, very close 3rd both times. And so, but having worked within the Democratic Party, I was compelled to leave this year. And I don't know if we want to, I'm also Jill Stein's campaign manager for her presidential run. And I'll identify Justin here as part of the Stein team as well. So I'm happy to see him on the live stream. I don't know if we want to jump right into some commentary on that video, but I did have a couple of things that I wanted to say about that video that we
Sure,
just
go
watched.
right ahead.
And one of them, if you watched Nancy Pelosi on State of the Union this morning, that she, spicy Matt laughing, so probably know what I'm going to say here.
I had to take an extra blood pressure pill.
So Nancy said a couple of things. First of all, she said a ceasefire is what Putin wants, and so she's still trying the tired old narrative of trying to say anybody who wants a ceasefire in Gaza or anything that opposes the U.S. war machine is playing for Putin. And I think it's just a tired and stale, but also a very undemocratic way to approach the narrative from the Democratic Party. So and the other thing that she said this morning was that she wants to investigate the people who are getting out in the streets. She wants to investigate where the financing is coming from for these grassroots organizations who are getting out into the streets to protest genocide. So I look at her statements as right along the lines of what has happened to Julian Assange, and they want to pressure, they want to put the fear of jail time, of financial ruin, into just basically people who, in a state of sort of despair and their conscience calling them to stand up against this genocide, that they have to worry about, wow, is my government gonna throw me in jail because I stood up and said no to genocide? And that's exactly the subtext of what Nancy Pelosi was saying here. And it is right along the lines of what is happening to Julian Assange, that you start speaking truth to power and they say, we're going to ruin you, we're going to throw you in jail. The other thing I wanted to say is, having worked within the Democratic Party for 20 years, and me being a very left-wing activist within the Democratic Party and really pushing progressive values and really pushing, and I'll say that I left the Democrats for the Green Party because I do not think the Democratic Party can be changed.
No.
And when Nils talked about the character assassination, that is what the establishment goes for. They do not go on for issues. They do not want to discuss issues. The first thing they want to go is, I've been called a bully. I've been told I harass people, when all I am doing is speaking truth to power. Chris, you probably, maybe have experienced the same thing. These are establishment tactics designed to deflect from real issues that are happening. So as I was watching Nils's video, those are the two things that jumped out at me: the criminalizing of dissent and the character assassination that comes along from challenging power rather than addressing issues. I will pass it over.
Right.
Justin?
Oh, hi. Yes, I'm Justin Paglino. I'm in Connecticut. I'm with the Green Party now for 5 years, a Democrat before that, and came to believe that a two-party system was inadequate, that we need multi-party democracy in America to have anything that is really a representative democracy. We're kind of alone in the world in having a two-party system. Australia has had ranked choice voting for 100 years, and as a result, they have multiple parties in their legislature. It's really not that hard, guys. We're just way behind. It's actually an easy problem to fix, but the two parties that are in control seem to have not a lot of interest in making this more than just a two-party system. Go figure. So it really has to be a grassroots movement to push for this, and it has to be a third-party movement to push for this. So I just feel really confident putting all my effort and energy into the Green Party because they share my values. And I know that when I'm fighting for these values as a Green Party member, I'm not just fighting for these values. I'm fighting to change American politics. I'm fighting to make this a multi-party democracy, a representative democracy, where you can find, there could be 6, 7, 8 parties. You can find the one that represents you. And we don't have this polarizing, toxic team sport mentality versus them, and all the toxicity that comes from that, and all the blindness to anything good on the other side. and blindness to anything bad on your own side, because it's a team sport. You know, if my team does it and it's bad, I'm not gonna even mention it. I'm not gonna bring it up. If somebody on another party, the other party does something good, you know, I'm not going to give them any credit for that. I'm going to be blind to that as well. So it really takes us away from talking about issues and makes it into just a vicious team sport, and everything gets simplified into us versus them. And the whole campaign of a party is like, we're better than the other guys. That's the whole campaign, is like, if you don't want the other guys, then you have to vote for us because we're your only other option. And that's just not
No.
So I'll try not to go on this topic too long because I think about it a lot. But the criminalizing of political speech, the McCarthyism, painting people, it's what Nancy's saying is absurd. It's just absurd. Like how do you think she can get away with this talking point? Anything that somebody says that they don't want people to buy into, oh well, Putin agrees with you. It's like it's
Exactly.
it's so thin.
Yeah, it is really hard. I mean, I'm very much a third party supporter, but like I said at the top, this is a nonpartisan issue. And so I'm fighting really hard. I mean, it's fine. You guys all mentioned how you're running, but I'm fighting really hard to have every candidate that I reach out to understand that this really is not about party. This affects all of us. This is everyone's right to know the truth about what their government is doing. So if my Republicans that haven't joined are listening,
hey, we've got the best government money can buy.
Right.
No,
And
I
really,
agree.
this
I agree.
started way before they started persecuting Julian Assange. There's been a war on the truth in this country by the duopoly since the CIA started Operation Mockingbird and planting CIA assets in major media. This is just the latest, maybe most egregious, most obvious example of it. But something that Nil said at the beginning, we mentioned character assassination. Over the last couple of generations, the CIA as an instrument of the United States government and the deep state has just planted this mindset in the American public that there's only two viable parties. And they've made it easy for anything that's uncomfortable for people to contemplate, whether it's a Green Party candidate saying it, a Libertarian saying it, whatever it might be. Anything that's uncomfortable, they can very easily disregard it with one detail. Maybe for Gary Johnson in 2016, it was he didn't quite catch the question on Aleppo. Or it might be, with Jill Stein, there might be similar moments where it's just they've created this environment where people are so programmed to look at politics a certain way that when one little thing happens, they'll discredit a candidate or an idea or an issue or whatever it might be, while holding their own candidates and their own parties to such low standards. They'll accept anything from Democrats and Republicans, and then holding, and the bell that rung for me when he said that was my daughter and I did a protest at Senator Tammy Baldwin's office on Christmas Day. There was maybe 30 people there, and at least 4 or 5 of the people that walked by said, "Isn't he that guy that raped somebody in Sweden?" and just kept walking. And you don't have time to tell them that was all false, that the whole reason that happened is because Sweden is one of those countries that is happy to render people they have in custody back to the United States and to the CIA, et cetera, charges were never filed, et cetera. But that's what's implanted in their mind. And that is the mechanism by which they easily disregard not something that they're considering whether it's true or not, but that it's unpleasant. And a lot of the things that you folks say as Green Party candidates, and I say as a libertarian, and my fellow libertarians say, are unpleasant to people who are perfectly happy and comfortable with a lifestyle that just lets them choose between what they perceive as the lesser of two evils. That's a huge task for us to all work on together. But I think that's why we're all here.
That's, Phil, that's so important that you identify the fact that they will latch on to a thing and they will just hammer that thing and run that thing. And the thing that they've got with Jill is they have a photograph of her sitting at a table at a media conference with Vladimir Putin. Exactly. And I can't post anything about Jill's campaign without we call them blue MAGA at this point, without, these staunch Democrats saying, oh, she's Putin's ally, she's a Russian asset, when literally she was cleared by the Senate Intelligence Committee. They did a full investigation on her. And the Democrats are more than happy to keep running with this false narrative because they know that their adherents are not going to pay attention to facts and details. They're just going to go, oh, Putin, it's either you're in bed with Donald Trump or you're in bed with Vladimir Putin. And they don't need to think about the issues. And it's so interesting because the things that a lot of Democrats think that their party stands for in terms of progressive values, we're on the left wing of things. They think that their party actually stands for and fights for these things, whereas it's actually the Green Party that does stand up and fight for these things, where the Democrats, you will find if you go to the actual voting record, they block all of this stuff. So it's there's a massive amount of cognitive dissonance among rank and file Democrats and Republicans because they both do it. So I'm really glad you brought that up, Phil. Thank you.
Sure. And we've got a lot of work to do on this issue. And we have to remember too that not only are we speaking the truth on it, but we have to have a moral message as well, I think, to get through. It can't just be, the perception is wrong and everyone should be, upset because their democracy isn't working because we don't have the truth. But I think it needs to be framed in terms of, what your government is lying to you. Your government is stealing from you. Your government isn't functioning because they're not just omitting to tell the truth or failing to tell the truth. Clearly, this issue has been before them for a long time, and they fail to even take up the matter for most Democrats and most Republicans. And so they're intentionally doing it. So we have to point the finger at the one finger, maybe other fingers too, at the establishments of the two major parties and point them out as bad actors, not just matters of omission, and that they're actually wronging the citizens of the United States and anyone who wants to know the truth. And hopefully that'll help break through.
Yeah, and it's true. I have said over and over again, it is literally undemocratic for them to be lying to the American public. That's anti-democracy. If you want to have a functioning democracy, your leaders have to be telling you the truth.
Yeah, I like to put it in terms of an abusive relationship, and you have to be very careful with that language, obviously. But when somebody, in this case, our government, represented by two major parties, lies to you, steals from you, commits violence against you, and then gaslights you into believing it's all okay, what does that sound like? And that's strong language, obviously.
And I wouldn't. That you're the problem if you complain about it.
Yeah.
Let's hear from Justin, and then I see Diane's joined us. So Diane, can you introduce yourself after Justin's got his comment in?
Yeah, and I wanted to follow up with a thought about what Kelley said. Is that we are third party folks, and we tend to think in partisan ways, and we have a lot of critiques about the major parties. But if somebody agrees with me on this issue, like Julian Assange, great. The more people that agree, the more people in Congress that agree, the more the president agrees, the better. And I'm not gonna write off a person whole cloth because of one issue or another issue. I mean, in Congress, you're supposed to vote on issues one at a time. So if there's I noticed that there's a bill in Congress with 9 co-sponsors, HRES 934, expressing the sense that under the, that regular journalistic activities are protected under the First Amendment. There it is. And that the United States ought to drop all charges and attempts to extradite Julian Assange. So if you look at that bill, it only has 9 co-sponsors. I think Ilhan Omar is there from the Democrats. James McGovern is there from the Democrats. That's all I see. And I guess my point about a two-party system is, well, if you really care about this issue about Julian Assange and you go to your ballot and there's only 2 names on there and neither one of them are with you on this issue, you can't even make your voice heard about it. In a two-party system, you are constantly compromising your values when you vote. So even if the majority of people feel like they want to free Julian Assange, if that option isn't on the ballot and you don't feel comfortable voting for that option, if you feel like it's throwing away your vote or helping the greater evil when you vote for that, then that's a major way that the powers that be kind of keep democracy and the will of the people from getting expressed in government. So.
Right. I mean, you have a two-party system, depends upon us versus them, very binary. And in order to have that be successful, you have to control information, because if people find out that it really isn't just a binary us versus them world, and that we're really no different than they are and they're no different than we are, and our good guys are just as corrupt as their supposed bad guys, which is what the truth telling of WikiLeaks and Julian Assange accomplishes through its transparency, that's a real threat to that two-party system. So exactly. But Diane, welcome. And do you want to introduce yourself and maybe some brief commentary on why you support Julian Assange?
Sure. Can I be heard okay? I'm just going to leave my video off because I'm at an event. I just finished speaking at an event in the Bronx with the Bangladesh
we can
Bronx
hear you
Society. Fine. Good.
Fine.
Yeah. Well, I'm a candidate for U.S. Senate. I'm an independent. I probably will end up calling my line, because in the state of New York, you can't be an independent. You have to declare yourself. You have to make up a title. When I ran against Schumer, I said LaRouche Party, because I worked with LaRouche for 35 years, who was the target of this exact operation. And I think, look, we just had a huge breakthrough, which is that the South African case at the International Court of Justice on Israel committing genocide in Gaza was successful. Basically, everything except a ceasefire, which some legal people say they couldn't actually ask for because Hamas is not a state, but everything is clear. Israel has to stop committing genocide. Now, in spite of that ruling, we see in the United States, any organization calling for a ceasefire is labeled as pro-genocide against Jews, pro-terrorist. They are shutting down people at campuses, and people are getting fired. And you saw that they were sprayed with probably skunk spray, a military chemical used by the IDF, the Jewish Voice for Peace and the Students for Justice in Palestine. This is unbelievable, but it is absolutely typical of a nation which would seek to give a journalist, Julian Assange, a 175-year jail sentence under the Espionage Act, which is the most bizarre thing. And by the way, I should say the origin of the Espionage Act was to prevent anyone from saying anything bad about the British or the U.S. at the time of World War I. But it was to cement our relationship with the British. And this is particularly perverse because if you read the accounts of various historians and others and prisoners of war who were treated absolutely hideously and horribly by the British, all of that history got erased with that Espionage Act. And the new narrative became, oh, well, the United States and Britain were really just cousins and it was just a little falling out. And that nothing could be further from the truth in terms of the conception of our nation as an anti-colonial power. And that very much got lost, I would say, particularly, well, the Espionage Act and then the of the Kennedy, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, was a point for the worse for the United States. Oh, dear.
Yeah, you broke up the last minute.
I just wanted to say something about something Phil said. Oh, sorry, Diane, I couldn't hear you.
No, go ahead. I don't know why everyone started calling me all at once at the same time, but I just think this victory of the International Court of Justice is huge. And I just wrote a statement called the Congressional Wall of Shame, because how dare members of Congress call the case meritless, unfounded, and literally disgusting is the language they use. And now they are going to be caught. And whether it's immediately, which I hope the sooner the better it is that they go down in infamy and disgrace, but it will happen in history that they are known as aiding and abetting genocide. That's it.
So I just wanted to address something Phil mentioned, and I've run into that too, particularly a lot of women that I've spoken to about Assange. They had that response about the rape allegations. And I'm not going to read any of it because it's rather graphic, but if you want the real details on that, Nils Meltzer's book, I mean, he goes into it. There's a whole like chapter on that. And there were two women and the stories start blending together and you read it and it really just doesn't add up. So I won't read it out loud, but
well, it's a pretty common political tactic, and one that candidates need to adopt a little bit, well, at least part of it, is when they say something short and false. If the refutation of it is long and complicated, then people will remember what they heard first. In the short, I mean, Donald Trump is a master at that, I guess. You know, it says short little things that stick in people's head, whether they're true or not, you know. And we need to adopt messaging about this issue that is short and not just let me tell you a story about Julian Assange and then it has to be 20 or 30 minutes long to tell the whole thing. That's not going to be effective to people that aren't already on our side. And if we're going to be successful in this, we need to build up the support from the rank and, you know, people all over the country and let them realize it. And we need good slogans, good little 6-second bites that really tell the story and drive it home in a way that will emotionally activate them and not just from a sense of, you know, cold justice, because that's what's against us. They're masters of messaging, you know, the duopoly, and we need to fight back.
So I'm going to pull it. I'm having a little difficulty pulling this up while I'm on the screen. So someone else talk, and I'm going to pull up this letter that is mostly Democrats. I believe it's most of the squad. So I think there is some hope, you know, I mean, I'm with you guys. Like I feel this similarly about third parties. I want to see them succeed, but we have to work with what we have right now too. And that is, we've got to get more people that are in Congress right now. So actually, I've got two things I want to pull up on the screen. So I'll let you guys talk while I fiddle with this.
I was going to ask, all of y'all have run before multiple times, and what has been your experience when you've been campaigning these last, several times for y'all, in terms of the public's knowledge of what's going on with Julian Assange and the bigger implications of it. So, Justin, I know you've run a couple times. Has this come up when you've been campaigning?
Not as much as I would like. I was in a debate on my first run, a televised debate where there were no questions asked about it. And then the second time I ran, there was no debate at all for a congressional campaign. If Rosa didn't want to debate, so there's not going to be a debate. And, but I do get to talk to some people individually about it when I'm out there. But it needs a lot more. It needs a lot more attention. There are I have to think about ways. There are movies that you can have a watch party and maybe try to get people together to learn about it that way. But Julian's a political prisoner, and now they're making. We have to all be afraid of this. What's happening to Julian? I mean, how long has he been locked away on these charges? He's a political prisoner, and now we all have to be worried that this could be the sights of these guns are going to be turned on us. I mean, look at what's happening to the Uhuru movement, that they have a federal raid. They're a political party because maybe they took like a few $100s from a foreign donor or something. So the FBI is going to do a raid on their house. I mean, political speech has got to be protected, and it's just increasingly scary what happens. What's happening in terms of the powers that be feeling they have free reign to go after people if they don't like their speech. And we see that with the Gaza protests. What's happening with that right now is really terrifying. It's McCarthyism. People losing their jobs at universities. or who knows how far they're willing to go. So Julian is, when we try to save Julian, we're trying to save freedom of speech and freedom of the press and the right to protest. And he's a textbook. He's kind of the canary in the coal mine, if you will, and so critical. If we let what happened to Julian happen, and we let it keep happening, could just going to keep happening more to more and more Americans.
Right.
Okay, I've got this finally. Sorry, I was telling Phil how easy StreamYard is to use, which it is great. But
Chris has got a comment, Kelley. So.
Oh yes, go ahead.
Yeah. In Cuba, they have like 13 parties, and it's actually against the law to donate to a political party in Cuba. and we had ranked choice voting go through our assembly and our Congress here in California, and it was vetoed by both Newsom and Brown at the governorship.
Yeah, doesn't surprise me.
No, they protect their political turf very well.
Yeah, and they created an open primary system with only two people getting to
two
move
people.
On.
A or B, which one you want? It's laughable.
It's no better.
Okay, I'll show this now. I think we talked about this the first time, but yes, you've got that HRes 934, which is, I think I have them memorized now. It's Rep. Gosar, who's Republican. So the House resolution is mainly Republican. You're right, only the two Democrat. It's Omar and McGovern, and then it's like Massey and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Luna and some others I didn't recognize, but Burleson, I think, is one. But then strangely on this letter that was from, let's see, November, so just a little bit earlier, we've got, like I said, most of the squad on here. Mm-hmm. And you do have some of those same Republicans. But
I think Rand Paul wrote that letter, didn't he? The November one?
I thought McGovern wrote it, but I may be wrong. You may be right.
Right on the second page.
I think it was McGovern Paul, wasn't it?
Maybe so. So. Yeah. So, but it's titled, I don't know. On here it says McGovern.house.gov. So I'm assuming maybe he was first listed or something. I don't know. But at any rate, my point is just that, we've got to get the people that are in office. I think that is really important to put pressure on them. And with that, I'll go to my next slide. I think I can do this. Is that it's right here. Okay, so I have to point this out. This is on Twitter. Just how much Twitter is not a place of free speech. If anybody really spends a lot of time on Twitter, you realize this. But so here's the little graphic I made for that. And I noticed underneath, you'll get these little show additional replies, including those that may contain offensive content. Apparently, it's offensive. This guy saying, please call Congress now. Here's the number and ask your rep to support House Resolution 934. So I just want to point that out. Like, I was like, why? Because the guy, I think he tweeted it at me again because I didn't see it because of that, So
that happens all the time, Kelley, all the time on Twitter, where you'll see something where somebody is identifying, it's anti-establishment, it's counter to the official establishment narrative, but there's no offensive content in there. It's just, it's some truth telling, and they hide it all the time. I've noticed that frequently.
So yeah, I think we all get like kind of preaching to the choir. I'm with you 100%. I'm just trying to reach some more people that maybe don't realize that or wouldn't know. But we all know, us political junkies, how it all works, I guess, right? But it's about getting candidates to talk to people in their districts. And I don't know, maybe, first of all, try to call your people that are currently in office, put pressure on them. If anybody sees this, like, tell them like to call. I'm going to vote for the other guy if you don't do this. That's what I would like to see happen. So I think this person. I think he's here in North Carolina, Matt, but pointed out to me that, hey, we got to work on the people that are in office right now. So that's very true. But on that note, I think it would be a good time for a clip. So I've talked a lot about Nils Meltzer, who I think has, as I said, just been phenomenal. Plus he's in a suit, so people pay attention. But it's true, Yeah. And he's worked at the UN. But I think the other person that really, she's been a regular guest on Randy's show, Stefania Morizzi. I got to meet her in DC last year. She wrote this book on the case, Secret Power. And she's an Italian journalist, but she in college studied cryptography. She's like just incredibly smart and very detailed on everything. But I found these two great clips. It's two, so forgive me, they'll be right back to back. But what she had to say about the case.
You know what is secret power? Is basically when the state secrecy gets used not to protect the security of citizens, but to shield state criminality at the highest level in order to grant impunity to the institution which commit crimes. And this is why Julian Assange is in prison. This is why they want to destroy him. Because for the first time, Julian Assange has exposed, ripped a big hole in this secret power. And
Right.
he has allowed to millions, billions of people to look at these dirty secrets of the secret power, That's why they want to destroy him. They absolutely want to destroy. They want a bad hand. So you see very rarely, at least in our European democracies, you see very little this power. He loves obscurity. He loves darkness. They operate in darkness. So the ordinary citizen doesn't even perceive this power. They are interested in the ordinary, the visible power, the power which give them pension, healthcare, education, work, jobs.
Right.
But they don't think this, high level invisible power is relevant for their lives of ordinary citizen. But it's not true. It is relevant.
Right.
It decides whether they stay 20 years in Afghanistan when they have no money for hospitals. We didn't have the money for hospitals. We didn't have money for decent schools. And yet we spent 20 years in Afghanistan, So what WikiLeaks did, and this is the reason why they want to crush him and they want to crush the full organization, is that he brought sunlight in this, exposing this secret power, making it visible, exposing his dirty secrets.
So if you haven't read that book, you could get the book. Stefania has also been on a lot of interviews, Consortium News, Randy's show, obviously. You can find her all over, but she's been fighting in the courts as well to try to get these emails that were hidden in the the CPS UK, in the office there about the WikiLeaks case. People deleted emails. She's been trying to get those revealed. So she's just been I think she and Nils have been probably some of the most influential. I mean, everyone has their role in this fight to try to free Assange, but I think they've really been very, very influential. So I'm sorry, Jason, I hope you got what I was saying about the third party. I really, I'm with you, but I'm frustrated because I've been working on this show for 4 years and we're getting down to day X, as we all know, and it's terrifying. And I think too many people out there still don't understand how this is going to affect them. Like Meltzer said, if you want to wake up tomorrow and not realize it's a crime to tell the truth. So that's really been my goal in all this. And I know third parties are way ahead of the game in this, but hopefully we can push on everyone and just talk to everyone. Talk to your neighbor, talk to your cousin that won't listen. Anything you can do.
But going back to, and this is actually what I forget her name, Stefania,
yes,
had said. Going along to the question that Matthew had asked about, is this a topic of discussion as you are canvassing as a candidate? And the answer is no, because people are like, no, my rent is going up and I don't have health care, and inflation is making it so I can't pay my utility bills or buy food, and I can't afford childcare. So this issue is a very, sadly, it's a very niche issue that people who are politically wonky are paying attention to, but I would say that the majority of the public is not paying attention to. If you are aware of the issue, to put pressure on your Congress people to support that resolution. But the reality is, I don't think that any congressperson at this moment is really thinking that this is something that is going to come back to them in some way, which is
Right.
kind of scary, because what we are talking about is criminalization of journalism. And you correct me if I'm wrong here, because I'm trying to think about what the case against him for espionage is. It seems like it's ludicrous, because my understanding of the charges of what Julian actually did, that publishing information that came to him, is nothing more than every major media outlet does on a daily basis. They have anonymous sources. They vet it, they check its veracity, and if it's verifiable and all this stuff came from government files, then they're free to publish it and protect their sources. And so what we are doing here is taking that off the table for journalism in general. What does that mean for us ever getting to the truth of anything?
Well, and
Right.
isn't it true that the Obama administration basically verified that the initial release of that information was all true? That was one of the reasons they didn't follow up on it. So it's not even a question of harm. It's just the truth, which I don't think the public knows about that either. The general
Right.
public.
Well, so we had the last panel, Christina Khalil running for Senate in New Jersey, and she tied it in with police reform stuff and transparency there. So I think one way you can talk to people about it who don't feel like it affects them is it's about transparency, in government, in every aspect of it. But I thought that was a good way that she tied it in. But I hear you, people are struggling economically, and that this is kind of like over here, not other than I think there's a divide there politically as well, right? We know this, Democrat and Republicans are less likely to trust the media. I mean, this has grown and more and more after the Trump years. So I think there is more attention on that. Maybe if you can somehow tie it in when you're talking to people about how bad the media is, and what if that's all we have? We don't, because they're going to try to shut down all independent journalism. And that's really scary. Yes, Justin, jump in.
Yeah, could someone remind me, because I'm not up to speed on this question. What major media outlets have stood up for Julian? Because I know he co-published some of his stuff with the New York Times.
Mostly Europeans.
Yeah. So a year ago, about 13 months ago, Justin, the 6 papers that have published the bulk of the WikiLeaks Iraq war logs put out an editorial in his defense. It was lukewarm, but it was in his defense, and that was the New York Times, El Pais, Der Spiegel, Le Monde, and can't remember the other 2. But certainly they are getting around to acknowledging the weight of what this actually really means for them. And I've found that journalists are some of the worst about this because they're purposefully ignorant. When I've had conversations about journalists, about Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, it's very often a response of, don't tell me, because if I know, then I have to care about it. Then I have to do something about it. So they're happy to go along with the lies that he's not a journalist, or they're not really a news organization because they didn't do editing. Like all these specious falsifications that allow people to excuse what the government is doing because those specious fabrications, that means that it's not going to apply to me. But more and more, I think the gravity, the weight of this is being understood. And we haven't heard from Diane for a while. And Diane, we can't see you. So I want to see if you want to chime in, because I don't want you just sitting there on the phone.
Maybe she took a call. Oh,
no, it's okay. There's too much going on right now. So I'm sorry. I'm listening as much as I can, and I'll chime back in when I can.
Well, I think I want to play this really short 50-second clip. I'm probably going to play this one every time, because this is the other aspect of this case that just, it drives me nuts. And I bring it up every time with as many people. I even actually asked one of Assange's U.S. lawyers. I got to ask him face to face at the National Press Club at an event. It was a Belmarsh tribunal. But I said, I don't understand this. He's not a U.S. citizen. How is this happening? And I joke about it. And I say, what if China said, hand us Rachel Maddow, she broke our laws? Is that going to happen? No, it's not going to happen. So it's the Espionage Act, like reaching out, like we can just punish any person. He wasn't in the U.S. This didn't happen in the U.S. The charges, the conspiracy to commit hacking, Manning had access to that already. So there was some question about, did he try to give advice of how to cover up her tracks? But there's no evidence that he hacked into anything. So anyway, this is this clip. This is Ben Weisner from ACLU. I think he's the technology, I forget his title exactly, but Ben Weisner talking about the Espionage Act with this case.
If they actually extradite the guy, we're going to be setting a really dangerous global precedent, right? Because what do newspapers in the West do? Well, we try to figure out the secrets of other countries, like China, like Iran, like Russia, and publish them in the New York Times or in the Guardian and the Washington Post. So if Julian Assange can be extradited to the United States because as an Australian publisher, he didn't respect the US secrecy laws, why shouldn't a New York Times reporter be extradited to Beijing because as a US citizen, he didn't respect China's secrecy laws, right? This is a really, really serious game that's being played here, and a really dangerous precedent that could be set if we say that a non-American journalist not working in the United States is somehow bound by American secrecy laws.
Oh, and I'm sorry, I didn't finish my thought there on asking Assange's lawyer, Barry Pollock is his name. I just kept pushing. I said, well, I don't understand this. Like, if he's not a U.S. citizen. And he just finally said, it's never been tested. So I was like, wow, okay, so we're testing it on him. And I have a couple other clips. I don't know, maybe it's too much to get into on this panel, but I will play them at some point. It's attorney Bruce Afrin, who I believe maybe you guys know who he is. I think he's done work with Nader, Green Party. And Joe Lauria of Consortium News. If no one has anything else to say, I'll play them. But they're talking specifically about that with the Espionage Act. And Bruce Afrin suggested that Assange's lawyers in the U.S. just go file for dismissal on the grounds of jurisdiction. So if you want to hear him, I'll play him. Or if anybody else wants to play it, please play it.
Yeah, please do.
Okay, so there are a couple here. I think we're totaling like 5 minutes, like 2 minutes, 20 seconds. Okay, so the first one, jurisdiction. Okay.
When it was written in 1917, the Espionage Act covered any activity in the United States, any territory of the U.S. or on the high seas. And there was this incident in Warsaw in 1958 or 59 when an American diplomat was found in bed with another woman by Polish security services. They showed him the photographs and they blackmailed him to get documents out of the embassy. When he left U.S. territory to go onto Polish territory to give those documents over, he could not be charged under the Espionage Act. That incensed one member of Congress who got that part of the law dropped. But as Bruce points out, they never replaced it with anything. So it's not exactly clear what the jurisdictional issue is. And Bruce, in the piece, goes through some text and case law to show about how jurisdiction works in the U.S., including Supreme Court decisions. Bruce, can you talk a little bit about the jurisdictional issue for Assange and why you think that the U.S. under the Assange Act does not have jurisdiction over Julian Assange?
What the Supreme Court has said very clearly is that a statute must clearly and expressly give the U.S. extraterritorial jurisdiction in order to prosecute. And those words were chosen by the court really for due process reasons. Assange, sitting in London or in Reykjavik, believes he's not within the scope of U.S. law. Yet the U.S., using a vague statute, now attempts to haul him into the U.S., and he's sitting in jail in Britain for 2 years now during an extradition proceeding for that very reason.
4 years.
Well, yeah. And so what the court has said is you can't do this. Congress can't reach out across the seas unless Congress specifically says so. And the Espionage Act has absolutely no language that would allow that inference. It says U.S. facilities and U.S. bases can be the subject of a prosecution if someone takes records or documents from them. There's not the slightest hint that sitting in London or sitting in Reykjavik or anywhere else, and you get an email from Chelsea Manning with documents, that will lead you into prosecution in the U.S.
Okay, here's the next one.
I would start out with jurisdiction. I would move to dismiss this on the grounds there is no extraterritorial reach, and therefore Assange should not even be brought to the U.S. And he's not really a fugitive in any real sense. He was never here. He's not a U.S. citizen. The offenses were not committed here. So I think Assange has the right to go to court now, even while in London, and move to dismiss. I'd start with the jurisdiction. Right. Then I would move to the vagueness of the statute, because that is a clear due process violation. It's never been tested in any court decision, either the First Amendment end of it or the due process end.
Bruce mentioned the issue of the fugitive, and I want to just give it more explanation what that means. To try to go to court now in Virginia while Julian is still in Belmarsh and his extradition case is still up for determination, maybe by the High Court, it would mean bringing this motion now while he's still in Britain. But the U.S. could argue, or the U.S. prosecutors could argue, that Assange is a fugitive, and therefore it doesn't apply. A doctrine called fugitive disentitlement. And Bruce, you don't agree with that. Tell me more about why that wouldn't apply here, in your opinion. Why he'd be able to do it now, to go now to the court to try to throw this case out, and not wait for him to be extradited here.
Yeah, there's something called the disentitled fugitive doctrine. That means that if you're not within the U.S. and you've absented yourself, you don't have the right to dismiss the case until you show up and accept the court's jurisdiction. That's the normal rule. But it has never been applied to a person who's not a U.S. citizen, who didn't live in the U.S., and who was not here when the offenses were committed, and who didn't flee the indictment. Julian Assange was never even here when he was indicted. He actually came in 2010 after the WikiLeaks publications. He wasn't under indictment, and he left in the normal course after a press conference. So he never fled the U.S. He's not a traditional fugitive. And the cases all speak of people who deliberately leave the country to avoid an indictment. Assange never did that. Julian Assange is not a fugitive in that sense. So in my view, and it's something that's sort of new because it doesn't happen very often in law, in my view, he can go to court right now, staying in England, and have lawyers in Alexandria in federal court make these motions. So I think that he should be making these motions now. I think he has the right to. I don't think he's a fugitive as the law understands.
Yeah, one more, 43 seconds.
There's something called the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which you may have heard of, and that regulates bribery in foreign countries. And what the U.S. says in that law is that if the money for the foreign bribe goes through a U.S. bank, or if the company that pays the bribe has stock trading in the U.S., then that person giving the bribe or the company can be prosecuted here. In other words, we create this geographic specific connection to the U.S. in the law to gain extraterritorial power. None of that exists in the Espionage Act. There's really no legal basis for the U.S. to prosecute Assange. And this entire extradition proceeding is really based on the absence of jurisdiction.
Anyone want to jump in?
Wow, that's news for me anyway. Another angle that this is so corrupt and criminal, what we're doing to this poor man and to our own right to know the truth.
Absolutely.
Could I say something?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry. Just, one of the things we're really dealing with is the question of how do you shift the power, because what you have is a situation where they know there is no crime, but they don't care, and they feel that they can continue to get away with this. And this is, by the way, Leo Strauss, if people know of Leo Strauss, Chicago University, the ignoble liar, or the idea of how you instill terror and run a dictatorship is not merely what everyone repeats from Goebbels about telling a lie over and over, or whatever all the various things are about how you can make people believe a lie. But the way you get a dictatorship is that you do things that are completely unconscionable or blatantly false or illegal right in broad daylight, and demonstrate that the victim of this crime is unable to do anything to prevent it, so that people get a feeling of powerlessness and despair. And that is how you consolidate your grip on things. And that's why, again, I think that what happened at the International Court of Justice, the irony, the poetic, beautiful irony of all of this is, what is the power of the Palestinian infants who are being slaughtered? What is their power in the world? It is the conscience of the rest of the world to say, we have to move, we can't go along tolerating this. And if that breaks, when that breaks, Assange, in a sense, becomes a hero, as he actually is. The other thing, just on campaigning, if you go to my website, fairforsenate.com, I put freedom for Assange as just one of my 4 general points of my platform, the one that deals with the overreach and out of control intelligence agencies. And generally, I've gotten a good response from people, but in other words, I haven't really ever gotten a negative response, but I would say that the people who know about it support him being released, and then other people perhaps don't comment because they're really not familiar with the case. At any rate, that's just a couple things I wanted to throw in.
That's interesting, Diane, because you note that the immediate response of the United States to the South African case was, it's meritless. Well, we know it's not meritless. You know, they laid out their case brilliantly, and it's not meritless. And if anybody has standing to talk about an apartheid state and an attempted genocide, it's South Africa, a nation whose apartheid system we supported for decades. And so they are saying right to our face what we know is blatantly untrue, and yet we are the ones who, unless we figure out how to really band together, we're essentially powerless to stop it. And it's almost like they're taunting us.
But see, isn't this where? I just think it's great that we've had like more of a green libertarian like connection with all of this going on in the world, which is a really good thing, I think. You know, as people maybe start to understand, that's another thing you can talk to them about, is just that WikiLeaks exposed all this about war. A lot of people, that's on people's minds now. So maybe that's, you know, he exposed the truth about that, and the powers that be don't want that out. Maybe that's one way.
Well, I hope so. One of the challenges that we have too, and I'd be interested to hear from the other candidates here, is getting on the debate stage, because that's the sort of thing that legitimizes issues in front of the public. And Wisconsin is much like the federal system in that there's a private organization that runs the television debates and basically creates criteria to exclude third-party and independent candidates. I don't know about the rest of you, but that really creates a challenge for putting this issue in people's heads as something they should care about, because not only do they think that our candidacies and campaigns are less than legitimate or viable, but then the issue itself.
Remember during the 2016 debates, where was Jill Stein? She was in the next building, handcuffed to a chair.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Remember that as after Ross Perot is when the Committee for Presidential Debates was created, and that's owned by the Democratic and Republican parties, specifically to exclude another Perot from happening, or Jill Stein, or Gary Johnson, or whoever. So
yep,
we need to work together. Those are the sort of things: ballot access, debate access, that we can all agree on and work together. In particular, for the issues of peace and knowing the truth. And we're trying to do that in Wisconsin, but that's what I would encourage everybody to do.
Justin?
For my race in Washington, if I get past the primary, and again, we're a top 2 primary state, the incumbent will be forced to debate me. He ignored me for 2 cycles as a Democrat challenging him. That does it because I'm right on the issues. He's a complete corporatist, bought off by the fossil fuel industry and the military industrial complex. It does no good for him to recognize that I'm even running, and nobody is telling him to debate. So the key for me is getting past the primary. Once I'm past the primary, he will be compelled. He would not be able to walk away from it at that point. So I'm really looking forward to that.
We're seeing 2 presidential candidates now that are refusing to debate. I wouldn't underestimate the possibility of your guy just declining to attend because he'd have to answer to you.
So he could. Right. He definitely could do that. It certainly would not be advantageous to him to debate me, but it would also be not advantageous to him to decline it because he's going to get a lot of heat for it. We'll see what happens there. But I did want to note that the people who signed that letter in support, the representatives who signed that letter, they are all, like, I looked at the names, like Gosar, like, in my opinion, he's a bit of a loon. He's very much on the Trumpy fringes of the Republican Party. And so were the other names that I saw. I think I saw Clay, is his last name Higgins?
Higgins, I think Massey, though. I think
Massey's not a loon. Don't call Massey.
Massey's more.
That has been my opinion of some of the things that Gosar has said and done in the past. But just my point is to note, because some people on the Republican side of things would say the same about the squad. All of the signers of that letter were on the left fringes of the Democratic Party or the far right fringes of the Republican Party. And that says a lot about the political establishment of both parties.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say
my point.
Massey,
something about that. But just look, I was in Washington on January 6th. I, 1, thought the election was stolen. 2, had a big banner to Trump that he should free Assange, because obviously, I guess he's the one who did this crazy case, but it was an idiotic mistake not to do it. Assange and Snowden, because if you're really in a war with the so-called deep state, then that's what you do. I do want to say that I think a lot of people are becoming aware of this issue because there are, I don't know how many, it's a lot. It's dozens of people from January 6th who are still in prison. Some haven't been charged with anything, and many have been put in solitary confinement. And I was at a rally with an African-American Republican, and it was kind of funny because, or not funny, haha, but they were talking about the horrific conditions in the DC jails and the way that people were being treated. And this is a bunch of largely Caucasian, whatever you call it, conservative, had never in their life probably thought about what goes on in the prisons, the racism of the prison system, and just the system itself, now horrified and saying we have to do something about the prisons and political prisoners. And my friend, who happened to be running for office and was Black, he said, well, I've actually been talking about this for a long time. But it does, whatever you think about the merits of that. It is the idea that people are just being held, being detained, not being told what the charges are, not getting access to a lawyer. We have this all over the United States, and part of the division and everybody reacting to whatever else they disagree with is it keeps everyone from getting together on principle, whether it's the electoral process, the exclusion from the ballot, part of the problem is we have no place in this nation now for a robust debate or disagreement. We're not allowed to have disagreements. People, I mean, when's the last time, aside from the stupid candidate debates, which are really more like a game show with people banging on the button and trying to scream out the answer louder and faster, there really is no place for debate. And that is, I mean, how can you ever really find out what someone else is thinking and areas of possible higher principled agreement if you're not even allowed to argue about anything?
Well, it's going to get worse with the digital dollar. If you disagree with them, they just turn off your money.
We can't let that happen.
Justin, why don't you go? I know you've been trying to talk for a bit.
Thanks, Kelley. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of come back to that issue of our democracy not letting in these other voices. And, you know, democracy is a public good, and things that are public goods should be owned and by the public and taken control of by the public. So, you know, our democracy, our debates should be moderated by public institutions, should be hosted by public institutions. Everyone who meets a certain criteria, regardless of their party, should be included. You know, the fact that the Commission on Presidential Debates is a private corporation owned by the Republicans and the Democrats together is just a joke in terms of our democracy. It's just a joke. And, you know, and bringing those voices on stage at a debate that can bring up these issues like Julian Assange or other issues that just aren't going to get even debated among the two-party candidates sometimes, it just makes them invisible issues. Like I'm an MD. I ran on Medicare for All in my 2 congressional runs because I know that single-payer healthcare would cover everyone, save thousands of lives, save hundreds of billions of dollars, would be much cheaper when it's a system not run for profit. And that issue of single payer, it's not going to come up in the debate if I'm not on the debate stage because Rosa DeLauro, my Democratic representative, does not support it. And of course, the Republican doesn't support it. So who's going to bring it up for a debate? And if I'm not on the ballot, or if somebody isn't on the ballot who supports it, how can the voter even vote for it? And if you can't even vote for it, how is it ever going to happen? So I am all for writing. It's 2 separate problems. Like we need to spread the word about Julian Assange. We need to build up public support for the issue. But then there's all these structural issues with our democracy that keep the will of the people from being expressed and from making it into from electing candidates who share that opinion. You know, I mean, look at how popular single-payer healthcare is, and the bottlenecks on power at the top of these parties. You know, Nancy Pelosi won't even bring it up for a vote on the House floor because she doesn't support it. It doesn't matter, you know, that is very popular, and we couldn't get the squad to force the vote to even withhold their vote for Nancy as speaker so that she could agree to put this issue up for a vote in the House. And we saw the Republicans use this same tactic successfully to get several concessions. It only takes some people in a minority in the party with a very dedicated goal to get a concession out of somebody before voting for them for speaker to make this happen. They could have done it. They chose not to do it. Anyway, we have these structural issues, and we need to repair them so that democracy can function better, so that we can have more discussion of a broader range of issues. So that, I mean, Medicare for All is not even a fringe position. It's a very popular position, but the 2 parties are so corrupt that neither one of them wants to even talk about it.
I'm really glad you said that because I've been wondering why you never hear about a national single-payer Medicare for all anymore. It's like it completely disappeared, and it's for the reasons that you're saying. And it's not that no one's thinking about it. Particularly young people are very interested in making sure they have health care.
It's the insurance lobby, though, right? The insurance lobby is the reason we don't. The two big parties don't talk about it, because single-payer healthcare would cut out the insurance lobby from being, or the insurance companies from being necessary in the process.
Yeah,
You know,
I think we're getting into another topic.
Yeah, we are.
We've had you guys here for, which we'd all be happy to talk about. We've had you guys here for an hour and 15 minutes already. So
I love it. I could go another hour, but I do want us to stay on topic, and so maybe we could have another. I think Matt, we talked about.
Could I say something really quick?
Yeah,
go ahead.
Yes.
In 2018, we.
Why don't we go around and everybody give a final comment,
Okay.
where people can follow you out, how people can support you, and your last couple of comments on Julian Assange.
Okay, Chris, why don't you go first?
Okay. In 2018, when I ran, I contacted the League of Women Voters, and we got all of the candidates agreed to participate in the debate, except for the incumbent. The incumbent was busy back in Washington trying to impeach Trump. And that really didn't go well either. And it was a great debate. There were 5 of us on the table, and it was wonderful, but none of us made it. Yeah, I mean, one of the Republican made it to oppose Ami Bera, but that was it. And,
so do you want to tell everyone where they can find your campaign information, Chris?
Certainly. RCR4congress.us.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. And let's see, we'll go to Phil.
Oh, goody. Thanks for having us on. Obviously, I think all of us have a lot more we could say on this issue. But for me, I'd like to drill it down to this. And this sort of addresses Justin's comments he just made too. None of this can be fixed. The people aren't going to be aware. Democracy can't be, our representative government can't be restored. It's a mess right now. It's not really operating without people knowing the truth. And this issue that is most exemplified by the persecution of Julian Assange, the suppression of the truth that the American people cannot find out about what their government does and what the two big parties do, is the important issue that we all need to get behind. I've often made this point on the campaign trail, and you can follow my campaign at AndersonForUSSenate.com. That's AndersonForUSSenate.com. That we won't even have a chance to argue about the peace dividend. The Libertarians, the Green Party, the People's Party, whoever, we won't have a chance to even argue about that or all the other issues that may separate us, that we may honestly disagree on, until we have a seat at the table, a voice in the debate, until we get some people elected. And that won't happen until people know the truth. So let's work together on those issues so that we can break down the door of the two-party system, and then have a chance at real debate over whether democracy is a public good or why we don't talk about certain healthcare systems. At that point, it would be a blessing to be able to have those discussions with you and disagree. But until then, we're all on the outside looking in, throwing our individual rocks, and we need to unite together and throw a big rock on it.
Absolutely. Okay, Jason.
So I want to just take a minute and say that what's happening to Julian Assange is criminal. If he is extradited and essentially sentenced to death, it will be just another in a long list of criminal acts by our government assaulting democracy in our own country. So I'm firmly in support of Julian Assange. I wanted to say also, as Jill Stein's campaign director, that Jill is going to be, and Jill and I are going to be making a video for the Julian Assange, it's the Assange defense, that will be, I believe, played during the countdown period, the 24 hours before the decision on his extradition. And you can find me at callforcongress.com. I've got it listed there in my title. And all of my social media is at Call for Congress, except my TikTok, which is at Call for Congress _WA02. And I look forward to continuing the conversation, and hopefully we'll get some justice. It seems unlikely, but solidarity with everybody who's seeking justice.
Absolutely. Okay, Justin.
Thanks. Thanks everybody for being here. Yeah, Julian is a political prisoner, and it's very toxic to our First Amendment rights. What's going on, and if they can do it to Julian, they're starting to do it to Americans, the Uhuru movement and others, and people protesting against genocide. They can do it to anyone. Look at the way the FBI went after Martin Luther King. We have to always be vigilant to protect our free speech. And I just want to say one last thing about this. Yeah, write your Congress people. Yes, ask them, tell them, this is what you want. Spread the word, tell your friends. But do not, if you want Julian Assange to be free, do not vote for someone who isn't going to free them. Do not vote for someone who's going to free them. Don't give away your vote to someone who doesn't share your values. That's absolutely essential to your to moral integrity and to success and to getting the issue moving forward. Don't let fear of the greater evil change how you vote. Vote for what you believe in. And on Twitter, I'm at Justin for All too, and that's mostly where I am easiest to find these days. And my email is justin@justinforall.org with a numeric 4. So thanks.
Thank you. Diane?
Yeah, I think that we should all strive to be the people that Julian Assange and all whistleblowers hope that we would be. That is the reason they take risks to themselves to get out the truth, is that it is their presumption that people will be so outraged by what they learn that they will demand a change in the policy. And I definitely was when we learned, for example, about the torture at Abu Ghraib and other hideous crimes, and there were not millions of people in the streets. So I think we have a big obligation to be responsive to what is being told by the whistleblowers, to make sure that their efforts are not in vain and the changes that have to be made get made. And I will say I can be reached at SARE, S-A-R-E, for the word forsenate.com, running for U.S. Senate in New York.
Thank you, Diane. Matt, do you want to say anything else, or should we just go out?
No, it's just a great group of candidates. I really appreciate you all joining us, and I appreciate even more you all standing up for Julian Assange, WikiLeaks, for transparency, and for the First Amendment and press freedoms. And again, thank you all for this evening. And people who are watching, you can follow this on Candidates for Assange. It's the number 4 on Twitter.
Okay, so at the end of last show, I played it's music by Nils Meltzer on piano, along with some statues. It was a slideshow I made for Assange Countdown to Freedom, and I couldn't remember the name of the artist. And I have it now. And as I was looking, and bear with me, this is 10 seconds, and then we'll go into our song, but I have to play this because I found him. I knew he was on Twitter, but of course Twitter was hiding it. And I found this, and it's John Pilger standing with the statues. It's 10 seconds, and he is saying that John Shipton should be another one of these statues. And I think maybe we need one for John Pilger, but here it is.
I would suggest almost a 4th member of David's wonderful sculpture. I would suggest.
And with that, we'll go out with that song. But yeah, I think we need one. I think we need one for Pilger. Thank you all.
Thank